In this presentation, I'm going to be looking at the police officers on the job. Police officers are the second chapter on this subject, and this is found in Chapter 6 in your textbook. The reality shock beginning of police work. A lot of people kind of get their idea of what police work is from the media, and it's a shock when you hit the streets. It's not always what you expect it to be. The first few weeks or months on the job, you encounter the unpleasant aspects of dealing with the public, the criminal justice system, department politics, and things aren't always as you feel they'll be. You just there's a little bit of reality shock to what's going on. Well, part of this reality shock includes that you encounter some hostility from the citizens. I think also that you've got a lot of citizens that support you that you wouldn't think would be. So it can be both ways. Then you're now an insider in the criminal justice system. The people that your friends and relatives, they all think that you know everything that's going on. They heard sirens, so they'll call you up and ask you what the sirens were about. It's just that's not the reality. You probably have no idea what's going on, but they expect you to. And then you experience the department politics. One division doesn't get along with the other division. You've got a whole lot going on. You've got infighting or people who are getting I guess a hand up because of who they know instead of their doing the good job, and you have to deal with all that. Every department's got some type of department politics. As long as they've got more than a few officers, you're going to have some people that aren't going to get along with the others. And then, as a new officer, you're also impacted greatly by the seniority system. Most police departments base things like shift assignments, days off, vacations on a seniority system. Officers with more experience have first priority in requesting these. You get the plum jobs, and the rookies, well, you're just a rookie. You're gonna do what the senior officer says. Part of the reason for seniority is it does seem to help eliminate favoritism and discrimination, because it's not who you know, it's how long you've been there. But as a result, the night shift, the evening shift, often is overloaded with newer officers who have less seniority, and you've got the the day shift where things just aren't as hot. Though you have more report calls to make, your hot calls tend to occur on the evenings and night shift, and that's where the less qualified or the less trained officers tend to congregate because of the seniority system. And there is a rather unique police subculture that you have to get used to, a particular set of values, beliefs, an acceptable form of behavior that is characteristic of the American police or the specific department you're with. And they vary from department to department. There's a little bit of group solidarity, kind of secretive. There are certain things you can't tell people that you're doing, particularly, some type of investigations. So there are things you can't talk to your family about, either because they must be secret, or because you just don't want to burden your family with some of the underbelly of the world that you see. And then officers have been known to have the code of silence. We don't talk about wrongdoing within our department. You keep the family secrets within the family. Police also have a capacity to use force like just about no other occupation around. You may go to work and have to take someone's liberty away by arresting them, or even take their life away in a life and death situation. There's the danger that is always possibility, though in actuality, most officers are not going to, on a day-to-day basis, get involved in a violent confrontation or a life and death situation, but there's always the potential, and this is the potential that you have to be alert to and be well aware of, because when it comes up, it could be too late if you're not alert to it. And then there are conflicting demands on the law versus order, the pressure to bend or evade the rules to get evidence and confessions, because you want to make that big arrest, you want to clear that big case, you want that guy that you know is guilty arrested and convicted, but you got to follow the rules, because if you don't, the exclusionary rule may keep all the evidence you have against an individual out, and you won't be able to use the evidence against him, and you won't get a conviction that way. As far as the code of silence, also known as the blue curtain, it's kind of the honor code whereby officers refuse to testify against corrupt colleagues, creating a veil of secrecy around police action. It's not as prominent today as it was even when I started in police work. It just, but it's still there. Secrecy is the context, and it's the attitude displayed by officers to the rest of the world. It's kind of times an us against them. Secrets can be for legitimate reasons, or it can be about misbehaviors of other police officers. And today, police officers are far less unified and far less likely to have an us against them view on civilians. It just, like I said, things have changed during my career. You'll see more and more officers that will write other officers tickets or arrest other officers than you would have when I started in the system. And we're going to talk about Hebert's dimension of police subculture, and he related the different areas, our different type of officers, from the law officers, bureaucratic control officers, the culture of adventure and machismo, the safety officers or safety-minded officers, the competence or the morality-based officers. The law officers are those that, even though the officer exercises broad discretion, the law defines the boundary of permissible action. So even though you've got this subculture, you can't just do what you want. You have to follow the rules. The exclusionary rule will keep your evidence out if you don't follow the rules. The bureaucratic controls, officers, they don't act completely alone. You got to follow the rules of the department. They're subject to control by other members of the department and the criminal justice system, including judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, your supervisors, the city supervisors, city council. All those things can come together to control the way officers do their job. And there's a culture of adventure and machismo in the officers. And that's where officers put a high premium on active, aggressive police work. They respect other officers who go out and do the job, work gung-ho, and aren't the slugs that are just there to exist. The officer that's out making a lot of arrests, making a lot of traffic stops, putting people in jail, is held in higher esteem than the officer who writes his 2.5 tickets a day, answers his call when he gets his calls, and other than that, he kind of lays low. And then the safety conscious, or the concerns for personal safety, often will shape how an officer behaves in different situations. Often can lead to a bad perspective from the public when they see officers drawing their guns in situations when they don't quite understand what's going on. For instance, they recently had a woman that was videotaping an officer who drew down on some kids that she said were having a snowball fight. Well, that was far from what had occurred. The officers received a call of a man or a teenager who had pointed a gun at another teenager. When they got there, they had the 3 teenagers in the area. The one with the gun did run, and he got away. One officer pursued him. The other officer held the other 2 at gunpoint till he could search them and make sure that they weren't also armed. Well, at that point, he didn't know which one was armed. So, the officer was working out of their own safety, but that's not the view the public got of it. Now, competence, officers often take pride in their own competence. They don't want to be seen as somebody that couldn't do their job. They don't want to be seen as the officer, that slug that drops his calls on other people. The true professionalism. and it's not unique to police work, but you just want people to think that you can do what you're supposed to be doing. And the morality, officers make moral judgments about people and regard other people as good or others as bad, and they kind of tend to put more effort and respect to the good people and not as much to the bad people. Even though both of them can be a victim of a crime, you just tend to work a little bit harder on the case where it's an innocent victim or an innocent child as opposed to a prostitute or somebody or drug dealer who gets himself becomes a victim of a crime. The police work has changed significantly in the years. Since I've been on, you've got a lot more women, you've got a lot more minority officers, black, Hispanic, and something we definitely didn't have. We didn't have gay and lesbian officers. I'll rephrase that. We had gay and lesbian officers, but they did not let anybody know they were gay or lesbian. You kind of kept that hidden, but now there are many openly gay and lesbian officers amongst police work. And there's that intersection where gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual identity all comes together, and it can be a confusing field in the police work. In all these changes. And the levels of education among police officers has increased significantly in the last 30 or 40 years, from a time when very few police officers had any college to today when a significant number of agencies require some or even college degrees before they'll even hire an officer. Let's talk a little bit about the changing the rate, the impact of women police officers in this country. The first thing that kind of broke the solidarity of the work group when women were first in police work. Men didn't know how to react. The officers had a tendency to want to be protective, as it was back in the 60s, 70s when women first came in policing, particularly probably the mid to late 70s when they actually started working as patrol officers on the streets. There was a protective mode. There was a distrust of having a female officer there to back you when you needed it. There was the vernacular, the talk that went on the police wasn't necessarily appropriate in mixed company, and so there was it was a big change in the solidarity of the work group. And the attitude of men changed and have changed over time. Traditional. They didn't want women in police work, quite frankly. It was a man's work, not a woman's work. And then you got to the modern times, women in police work are just kind of the norm. They're accepted. Very few officers that I know today would not want, oh no, they're sending a female to back me. That just doesn't happen anymore. But it did in the past. And you kind of get then you got the officers that are kind of in between that. They accept women because they're in the business, but they still kind of look down on them as maybe a little bit lesser of an officer. The percentage of women officers is reigns around 12% nationally, and if you remember here in Texas, we're right around 11%. So that's pretty much within the national norm. But the number of women in higher ranks is even lower than at the lower ranks. Women tend to not promote up for whatever reason, by choice or possibly even ones that try to promote up meet with some resistance. They often work exactly the same as men, though women can tend to use their their reasoning and talking at times better than male officers. They've received fewer complaints than male officers. Possibly due to the fact that they are able to talk their way out of things more often than males. They're definitely less likely to use force, though I've been in some situations where the female officers have used extreme force, so it does occur, but they're still less likely than their male counterpart. But sexism and sexual harassment is still an issue. Female officers do report they've been harassed either by fellow officers or by citizens, and or had sexual advances made to them that that a male officer would not have. Well, black officers tend to have a little bit different attitude on things like excessive force, and they're more likely to support citizen oversight and support community policing. And they often work in the same area where they actually live. Um, but overall, they do not perform their duties a whole lot different than the white officers when you get down to how they do the job, how they support each other. Everything is much more closer to the white officers. And in Texas, 9.8% of the current officers are black, and this is slightly below the population in Texas. The black population makes up about 12.4% of the overall population. Now, Hispanic officers, their numbers have been increasing rapidly over the last few years. They often have dual identities, both as the police officers and members of the Hispanic community. I think you may find a lot of differences between second generation, third generation Hispanic and the more recent officer immigrants who actually were born out of the country. There are a little bit of cultural differences. Some departments they are the majority. You get down in the Valley area. I'm not positive of the San Antonio's population or diversity, but they have a very large Hispanic officer population, as does departments like El Paso. But again, particularly down in the Valley area, you'll find a lot of Hispanic officers in the area, as you will find a lot of Hispanic citizens. The minority officers believe that they're discriminated against in salary and promotion in departments that are not obviously the majority Hispanic. And in Texas, about 24% of the officers that are currently have active licenses in Texas are Hispanic, but the population in Texas is about 38% Hispanic at this time. Gay officers is again something that when I started the business, you certainly wouldn't have an officer admit they were gay, but there are similar departments that openly recruit gay officers. They're actually seek out gay officers in particular. I know the San Francisco department started doing that years ago, and it kind of made the big news. And by 1982, at least 10 departments were openly recruiting gay and lesbian officers. Gay officers tend to choose law enforcement for the same reason as traditional officers do, but they often would have discrimination on the job. Like I said, in my day, the gay officers, when I started in the business, while there were gay officers, there were no openly gay officers in my departments. They can get a lot of homophobic talk from other officers. You have a little bit of banter. There could be barriers to assignment. Those things have changed quite a bit in recent years. And we're talking about gender, race, and ethnicity. Relationships among officers of different races, genders, and ethnicity can be extremely complex. You'll find officers of a common race, common ethnic group will tend to socialize together with officers of the same common ethnic group. You'll see the female officers will have kind of a close-knit group. Tensions can often and conflict among the different genders and race can occur, and there can be, as I just mentioned, the self-segregation among the officers. But there is no credible evidence that officers of different races or ethnic backgrounds perform differently during interactions with citizens simply because of their race or ethnicity. That was a study from the National Academy of Sciences. You tend to find that when you're in a situation where things are going, you're not thinking about an officer's gender or race, male or female. You're just thinking there's a blue shirt there to help you, another officer there when you need the help. And the level of education among police officers has been rising. More and more departments are requiring some college or even college degrees for hiring. In this area, if you want to be a Houston police officer, you have to have 48 hours of college. League City, Pearland require 30 hours. If you want to go to work for Deer Park or Sugar Land, you need a 4-year college degree. And if you want to be a game warden in Texas, you need a 4-year college degree. A lot of the agencies will replace experience or military or police experience for some of the college hours, but some of them won't. For instance, the game wardens, it's a minimum of a 4-year college degree no matter what. An educational generation gap between younger and better educated and veteran officers with less education. This is kind of going away because we're getting to the stage where, you know, the 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 more and more of the officers have come up with the college hours when they've started at this point in the careers. You know, those of them that were older than me have mostly retired out of the business. But there is no strong evidence that higher education leads to better performance on the street, though there tends to be fewer complaints against officers with higher education in some departments like that. Now, they've done studies on cohort effects, and these are when officers are hired together. Officers hired in one decade will have different ideas and lifestyles than officers hired later decades. You know, there's that street culture of the veteran officer against the rookie. Um, the, I'm sure when I got hired, we all talked with the older officers talked about these lazy, you know, college kids that they're hiring in police work, and then you know they don't know how to do whatever. Well, uh, older officers today talk about the work ethic of the younger officers because it's different than it was when we were hired. You know, you just different attitudes. And I'm sure when the next generation is hired, the ones that are here today will talk about that next generation. But that happens in everything. It's not just in police work. I was kind of shocked when I overheard my daughter talking to a friend of hers one day, talking about this younger generation, how that she just couldn't believe how lazy they were. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? You're 25 years old now. She's 26 now, but you know you're 8 or 9 years older than these people you're talking about. But that still just kind of shocked me. But in police work, it's there. It's probably in every other industry, but you will see it and you'll hear it. And I'm sure the younger guys talked about these old dinosaurs that are in police work and how they just have no idea. You know how they can't use new technology and you know they just not out of touch with reality. Some of the organizational effects: the informal culture of police organization can affect attitudes towards certain important subjects. You get socialized into a police department much like you get socialized into a college. You get socialized into your new school. You get socialized into a chemical plant or wherever you work. There's going to be some things specific to that job. Well, again, with police departments, each department's a little different, and you're going to have some kind of socialization about what's important. You know, some departments are not going to accept things like community policing because that's not the way we do it, and others will, you know, embrace it because they think it's, you know, departments that don't participate in some type of program like that are just backwards. You know, they're back to the Keystone Cops. Well, there are several factors that mediate the officer's effect of their attitude on their behavior. You know, your attitude about things can often um, be a little more severe than your actual behavior. Police officers constrained by the bureaucracy and the criminal justice system. You may abhor child molesters, but you're limited on what you can do in finding them, arresting them. You're not at liberty to just take out street justice on them, because there's always that possibility of a citizen's complaint or a lawsuit, and that doesn't do you a whole lot of good. And supervisors advise against prejudicial statements that are contrary to the value of the department. You got to watch what you say because you never know when you're on videotape. You never know when you've got a camera on you, except you're on camera more often than not when you're in a police car today. Now, there are many different styles of policing. We'll talk about a couple of them. The active officers first. These are the officers that initiate more contacts. They're the ones that are out stopping people. They're out aggressively looking for violators. They're looking for burglars. They're looking for drug dealers. They're going to jump to back another officer in another call. When they are on calls together, they're going to be the one that will take control of the situation, take over for the more passive officer right there at the scene. They're going to make more arrests, write more tickets. They're just, I guess, more gung-ho. Usually the younger the officer, the more active they're going to be. They're not to say that officers, senior officers, aren't also active, but you tend to burn out a little bit as you grow older. Now, the passive officers, they initiate fewer contacts with citizens. They're going to respond to calls when they're given. They generally do it in very short order because they're going to do as little as they can, get it over with. They'll often work harder to get out of taking a report than actually taking the report. They're going to write their 2.3 tickets per day or 2.5 tickets or whatever makes the lieutenant happy, but no more. They're not going to stop people that they are street on the suspicious because they're going to, when they've got their 2.5 tickets taken care of, they're going to go find a hole to hide in. They're going to arrest people when they have to, but that's it. They're not going to go out looking for anything. You can find officers that were active officers that tend to burn out. They'll go into this mode. Sometimes a change of duty, sometimes a change of assignment can bring back the active officer from that passive officer, but sometimes they're just burned out. Now, one thing that has changed significantly in the last 35 years, that since when I started, is salaries and benefits for police officers. Um, Police pay has gone up to a level where it's competitive with private industry. When I started the business, it was not. You wanted to be a police officer because you wanted to be a police officer. You wanted job security was a big thing because you didn't have to worry about getting laid off like you got laid off at the plants. But now our pay is a little bit competitive. Maybe not quite what they're going to make working in a chemical plant, but you can definitely make a good living. There are plenty of opportunities to make a decent living. And there are opportunities for promotion within most departments. And most departments offer some type of incentive pay for college hours, incentive pay for advanced certification through the in Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. They have an intermediate, advanced, and master certification levels that usually get incentive pay. Departments often give incentive pay for things like being on the SWAT team, speaking Spanish, being an intoxilizer operator, just other things that can bring you. Usually it's a small amount, but you get two or three of them that get significant. In service training, most departments have opportunities for their officers to take training. They'll send them away to schools. Police officers in Texas have to have 40 hours of training every 2 years, so that's a minimum. So you do have to have pretty much 1 week of training every 2 years, but you can get quite a bit of other training. I was counting up the number of times today I've gone to training at the Texas Department of Public Safety Academy in Austin, and I think in my first 15 years as a police officer, I went through training there about 7 or 8 different times, from fingerprint schools to supervisor schools to polygraph schools to auto theft schools. A pretty good gamut. Really good education or training that they had. Very enjoyable. I haven't been there since 1976, I believe, was the last time I've been. So it's been almost 20 years. But I've had training at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Been through training in Baltimore for video enhancement software, and for fingerprint training throughout the state of Texas. So, and that's not unusual. That other officers will go through all kinds of training. There are many different training programs that you can attend to. Now, career development is where kind of the thing that keeps officers within a department. The opportunity to promote is usually big, or even lateral transfers to specialized divisions. Things about promotion, and to promote more often than not with a department that's not growing, you're going to have to wait for someone to retire or quit, or get promoted to a higher level before to open up a position for you. Now, some fast-growing departments, as they increase the number of patrol officers, they're going to increase the number of supervisors. And most agencies have some type of a testing position, a written test, an in-basket test, assessment center of some sort to test for the position of sergeant, lieutenant, captain on up. And when you do promote, your salary increases. The benefits are usually the same at all levels, but that's a big thing. Most police departments still have some type of a pension system, whereas private industry is going away from pensions. They're going into savings plans. Um, I'm very happy that they have pensions. I'm collecting 2 of them right now, so it is very nice to have those. And as I mentioned earlier, the other than promotion to a higher rank, assignment to specialized units can be the career goal of a lot of officers. Working as a detective, working as a crime scene officer, working on the SWAT team, working as a traffic unit on a motorcycle, helicopter division, a K-9 officer. There's many, many, many specialized divisions in the police department, and that's gives officers incentive to move around and to do a good job, because generally speaking, to being you're picked for the specialized division, it's because you were an active officer in the field and you came to the attention of the supervisors. Now, as far as lateral entry, a lot of departments will use lateral entry that will bring you into the department. It's generally going to be entered at a patrolman level, but often you can enter at a higher level than patrolman pay. Some departments who require their officers to attend their own police academy will have a separate academy for lateral officers who have experience that move over. But seldom do you, as a lateral officer, enter to a position at a higher rank than patrolman. Now, I can say that it does occur. When I got hired by Dickinson, I got hired at the rank of detective, which is a one-step promotion from patrolman. But it was because I was in a specialized field as a fingerprint examiner, and they were looking for somebody who had latent print experience. They had nobody in the department for that, so they had to go outside. And these coveted positions, sometimes they're more challenging, sometimes they can lead to a promotion, but mostly it's because there's some prestige, some excitement. It's something different than patrol, and people just like the positions for themselves, not what they can get. It's the position itself. And then, of course, outside employment. Police officers in this area work a lot of extra jobs. You can see them everywhere, from the local department stores, road jobs, football games, you name it, they work there. In fact, I worked an extra job for 21 years at Gulf Greyhound Park. I worked there while employed by 2 different police departments. I actually worked there longer than any other job I've held in my life, a little bit longer than my 21 years I was at the Galveston Police Department. I think I was 21 years and 6 months at Gulf Greyhound Park. So it beat my time with the Galveston Police Department. You can make good money. I know an officer that works for Dickinson who is a sergeant, so he makes good pay. One year he made more in his part-time jobs than he did in his full-time jobs. I think he had to carry a picture of his family around with him to remember what they looked like, because he was always working. But he worked all those extra jobs. That's what he wanted to do. Many departments require officers to go through a performance evaluation. These are, kind of keep up with what the officers are doing, whether they're doing their job like they should. They often will use these when trying to select officers for promotions or for specialized divisions. But there are some problems with it. Quite often the definitions used are not very clear. They're open to interpretation and are interpreted differently by different supervisors. Then we have, with the halo effect, you have supervisors that are going to rate all their officers well, and the other officers that are going to be very hard on their officers. So when it comes time for promotion, it's not always fair. I worked for Sergeant Joe. Sergeant Joe was a friend to everybody, and all his officers got excellent or good evaluations. Now Sergeant Smith,
Sergeant Smith, he was very hard on his officers, and if you didn't, do exactly everything the way he wanted to do, which not every officer agreed was the right way, then you got a lower evaluation. Even though you probably did more work than some of the officers working for Officer Joe, and did a better job, but because you were with Officer Smith, your evaluations were lower, and it made you not eligible for the promotion or as readily eligible as the officer working for Officer Joe. And then the other thing is the officers the evaluations tend to cluster around one numeric level. That halo effect, that one sergeant says he's going to cluster everybody as, 4 or 5 level, and that other officer who's very hard on his officer is going to all be, 3 or 4 levels. Um, but overall, there is a tendency to rate everybody high. Now, job satisfaction and stress. Job satisfaction in police work falls into 5 different categories. One's the nature of the work. You're working for a department. Maybe you're working somewhere where there's too much work and you're just stressed out, or you're working for a department where nothing ever happens. You get bored. You came into police work to arrest people, and nobody in your town, because you're working in a real small town, there's nobody to arrest. Other factors, the organizational factors, such as perceived support by the leaders, relationship with fellow officers, and opportunities for career advancement. Some departments are go nowhere departments. They don't have any room for advancement. You got a young department where everybody's young, and you've only got so many positions to promote to, and if everybody's young, nobody's going to be retiring anytime soon, so you don't have the opportunity for promotion, so that can affect it. But then again, if you're an officer department where it's growing and there's a lot of opportunities and the crime levels at the level you like, that can be some good factors when the administration supports you real well. Now, your relationship with the community. You work somewhere where everybody hates you. Things are probably not going well. You can be in a community like Ferguson, Missouri, where the community definitely is not supporting the officer. That's going to have an effect on the morale of the police officers. Very much so. Their job satisfaction is going to go down. As is the relationship with the media and the political establishment, how well you get along with the local newspaper, the local television stations, your mayor, your city council can affect the way you feel. And then your personal or family factors influence. Um, it shouldn't, but officers that are going through problems at home, it's going to affect their job. It's going to affect how satisfied they're with the job. If you're worried about your kids messing up, or if you're worried about your spouse is out gallivanting with somebody else and cheating on you, that's going to affect your job. And your attitude that you bring to work's not going to be right where it should be. Now, there are some other sources of job stress. There's the threat of danger, and a key point here, it's the threat of danger. Typically, when you go to work, you're not going to face a gun pointed at your head every day, but there's always the potential that it could occur. Citizens' disrespect or challenge to police authority, that can get under your skin, especially for some wet behind the ears kids starts spouting off. And then internal stuff, your department, yourself, the supervisors, unrealistic expectation of the supervisors, or rules and regulations that you just don't understand why they're in place. For female officers, often sexual harassment or sexism can cause stress, and it's just it can. If you come to work and someone's always making obscene comments about you, that can be very stressful. Now, as far as coping with job stress, many departments have programs that help their officers cope with stress and other personal problems. They're usually called employee assistance plans, and in theory, they're supposed to be confidential. That your supervisors don't know you're talking to them. They allow you visits with counselors and such. So again, without the stigma of everybody knowing that you're talking to a counselor. And we'll talk a little bit about the external organizational stressors, lack of interagency cooperation and community support. police departments can be competitive with each other, and that can cause stress as well as the citizens can cause stress. Ineffective criminal justice system. I know far too many officers that take it personal when they lose a case. They just it just eats them. You can't let that happen. I'm not. I can tell you if I've had a few cases that we've gotten acquittals in that have not been happy about it, or there've been times when you couldn't get charges on somebody, but you always have to say they're going to mess up again, and they generally do. But it can be stressful. And then the court system. Sometimes you work real hard to get someone arrested, and it takes you forever to make a case, and they get a couple months probation, and they're out doing the same thing before you know it. Political interference can cause stress. Politicians who think they're above the law, and often are. You find out that they can get away with things that most people can't. That can be very stressful, but it's part of the system. You just have to kind of live with it. Overly critical news media, media coverage, often with slanted stories, that'll leave out significant parts of what actually occurred. And then poor police minority relations, just kind of with the community support and community relations, that can cause a lot of stress. Now, there are many internal stressors within the department. Overly tough supervision, the supervisors that follow you around and micromanage and question your every move. Absence of promotional opportunity, particularly in departments where you're just stuck. Can't move to a different division, can't promote up, you're just stuck in that routine. Internal policies and procedures, they change all the time. Generally, when a new policy comes out, it's strictly enforced, and over time the enforcement goes down. But then you don't know when it's going to come back up. And then a lot of people, the paperwork, not just police reports, but internal reports, inventories, just all kinds of booking procedures. You just get stressed out over this excessive amount of paperwork. And then poor and substandard equipment. I can say we didn't have that problem when I was with the Dickinson Police Department, but when I got hired on in Galveston, 1980, one of the hottest summers on record in U.S. history, like second or third in U.S. history, we had two police cars that had working air conditioners. It just, and it was because of lack of maintenance. Air conditioner broke, they just didn't fix it. The seawall was very well patrolled at the time, because if you rolled your windows down, you got a good breeze. People would patrol the seawall up and down until they cooled off. After the sun went down, then the neighborhoods would get patrolled again. And it gets tough on the on the morale when you're driving around an equipment that's falling apart. So those are some internal stressors. Now, some more work-related stressors, work fatigue. We talked about working all those extra jobs. That's great. You make a lot of money, but man, you can get tired. As I'm recording this presentation, today is Mardi Gras, and I feel for the officers in Galveston because I know the number of hours I used to work, for the long shifts for the 2 weekends of Mardi Gras. You get tired. And when you're tired, you get stressed, and you don't always make the best decision. A lot of departments have rotating shifts, so you never get used to sleeping day or night. That's a stressor. The body never gets used to it. Conflicting roles in the community. Persistent fear and danger in police work. There is always danger. Like I said, the fear is greater than the danger itself, but if you don't have a certain level of fear, you get what we call tombstone courage, and you're going to get hurt. I don't want to ever work with a partner who's not at least a little bit fearful for his life when working. I don't want him to be over paranoid, but I want him to have some level of fear and not be totally fearless, because that's scary. Either one of them is scary. Either level, either just paranoid or just at a level where you don't, you have just that tombstone courage. Nothing scares you. And then lack of control over things, lack of control over your cases, lack of control over just everyday things. And then the internal reviews and performance assessments can be stressors. Now, what is the effect? Um, if you're under stress, things can happen. You just show up for late, work late, or not at all. You're when you do show up, your performance just isn't up to par. It causes people to retire early or get fired because they're doing stupid things with their poor performance. When you have a lot of stress in a department, there's a high turnover rate, morale's low, people get burned out, your relationship with the public is affected. When you're under stress, your poor performance can lead to police misconduct. You can snap and use excessive force and brutalize people. It's just not a good thing. You've got to have some type of stress relievers so that you can keep this from happening. And there are other effects that they can be physical and emotional. When you're too stressed out, you can get depressed. You can get some anxiety. You can get what they call somatization, which is actually physical illness caused by stress. Things like ulcers. That can really, they can physically make you sick. We can suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Police officers deal with things that sometimes you shouldn't have to deal with. Particularly with me, when it involved children, it would bother me. I can remember that the first time I had a gun pulled on me and pointed at me, and it was a big old, huge gun, probably a 32. We never recovered it, but at the time it looked like, looking down that barrel, and for probably a week after that, I'd wake up at nights looking down that barrel. It scared the tar out of me. No shots were fired. We knocked him back. We ended up catching him down the alley. Never did find the gun, but that was definitely some post-traumatic stress there. It's there. Things can happen, and the stress can affect not only your work, but it can affect your home. Officers under stress are more prone to domestic violence. They're more prone to extramarital affairs. You're trying to relieve your stress any way you can. Separation and divorce is very high among police officers, and a lot of it has to do with the stress factors that we see. Now we'll talk about the rights of police officers. Police officers have the same constitutional and civil rights as other citizens, but not always. Our rights are, as a public servant, you can't go around in your work uniform and campaign politically. You can't, you can't voice your opinion as readily as somebody who's working in another field that's not related to where you're at. While your First Amendment rights are protected, as far as belonging to unpopular religious or political groups, don't try to join the Ku Klux Klan or the Black Panthers and stay and work in the police department. Either extreme, you're not going to keep your job. It's just not going to happen. You, as a police officer, have to watch what you say out in the world where people know you're a police officer. You've got to watch what you say on social media. You've got to watch what you say anytime you're in uniform, because even though you have a First Amendment rights, when you're at work, your rights of the department are going to supersede your First Amendment right to free speech. Now, many departments follow a police officer's Bill of Rights, often falling under civil service, that protect an officer under investigation for alleged misconduct. But there is a high turnover and attrition from officers leaving police work. People decide they want to do something else. There's also a pretty high rate of officers returning to police work when they get out in the work field and decide, well, it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I should go back to it. Well, that concludes this week's presentation. Next week we're going to be looking at Chapter 7, The Backbone of Policing.